Gather around the campfire, boys and girls. We're playing a game. The game is simple. Spot the white savior. I'm going to show you two clips, and you decide who's the white savior. Clip number 1.
We used to have stop and frisk for criminals in this country, but liberals whined, so now we only have it for soccer moms at the airport.
I know, it was very difficult. You were trying to figure out what part of this makes this guy a white savior. Now I'm going to play you number 2.
So you like it when police stop and frisk black people, but you're angry when white women have to go through a metal detector. Got it.
And I know it's very hard to figure it out. The second one. Can we, for a moment, white saviors, come here. Let me look you in the eyes when I tell you this. You are still not liked, no matter how much you bitch and moan about the world, and you try to prove that you're not the problem, you will still be viewed as the problem, no matter what, because you're trying to puff your chest out and try to fight back against all the evil people that you deem stupid on social media. You think you're fighting for me, but in reality, you're pissing me the fuck off. Nowhere in that first video did anybody say anything about black people, about immigrants, or even about white women lurking around and being a nuisance to everybody in a public area. He said criminals, and your mind immediately, for some reason, went to black people. And no, I didn't stooge this or take it from another video. This is his own video compiled to try to make it make sense, because in the world of stupid people on TikTok or in any form of social media, you gotta somehow find a gotcha anywhere. But this ain't no fucking gotcha. It's a look at you with a mirror in front of your face saying, wow, that's how you view the word criminal, to where if you hear it, your mind immediately goes to me, the poor, disenfranchised, indigenous person of color. How dare you view me in such light, petty little white boy? It's embarrassing that you try this hard specifically for this gimmick that you think every time it's gonna be a home run. And I'm pretty certain you've had some home runs. But in this one, wow, the white savior showed, and you let us all know that you look at me, the disenfranchised, the victim, as nothing more than a criminal. And every time you hear someone else say criminal, you immediately think of me. And I'm flattered, but fuck you.
Yeah, so I think he said criminals. We used to have stop and frisk for criminals in this country. He definitely didn't say black people. He said criminals. And you can't just switch out the term criminals for black people, because those two terms aren't synonymous, right? And if someone were to switch out the term criminals and instinctively use black people, or switch out soccer moms for white women, that would be kind of weird. That would be engaging in racial stereotypes. Some would even say that's just being racist. And I just never would have been able to imagine that someone who spends all their time mimicking and poking fun at one political side for their supposed bigotry could slip up this bad with their own bigotry. Maybe he just got too deep into character. I don't know.
I'm at the airport right now, which is the same place that Date Right was when he made a video about stop and frisk. Now, when you say stop and frisk, when you mention that, you are talking about black people. Stop and frisk disproportionately affects black people. Yes, I was one of the liberals that whined about stop and frisk in New York City. I was one of the people who protested because it disproportionately affects black people. It is a tactic used by the NYPD on people just living their life. So yes, when Date Right called people that were stopped and frisked criminals, I found that offensive. Stop and frisk is a program of the NYPD where they deliberately just stop and frisk people of color. NYPD had a literal quota of how many people they had to stop and frisk. So NYPD would just stop and frisk people that weren't white. The statistics are all there. So when Date Right comes on and says, they used to stop and frisk criminals, so everyone that was stopped and frisked just walking down the street, walking to work, enjoying their life, is a criminal, and it's disproportionately affecting people that aren't white, yeah, I got a little offended. And let's bring it back to Date Right. So he's mad that they don't stop and frisk criminals, but they pat down soccer moms at the airport. Are we going to pretend we don't know who he's talking about, who he's dog whistling about? That was the original point of my video. This is my full explanation. You know what? My bad for not explaining it like I'm doing right now and just assuming all of you know about it. Because apparently some of you don't know it. The ones that are upset about this had no idea how stop and frisk works. And hey, now you know. Education is elevation. Am I right?
I do enjoy passive-aggressive double downs. Look, Mr. Education is elevation. Allow me to educate you so that I can elevate you. If you're going to assume, you need to understand that assuming makes an ass out of you and me. You started this entire discourse, not the other cringy guy at an airport trying to be funny and relatable on social media in regards to political topics. You took his words and turned it into, hey, they're mad about not being able to stop and frisk black people, even though the word criminal could apply to anybody I see out and about in the daily world, because I don't know everybody, and somebody I could be walking in Walmart with could be somebody who's robbed Walmart before, and they might be doing it again while I'm trying to get my Cinnamon Toast Crunch and my ground meat for my delicious tacos and my potatoes for my hash browns. But that's besides the point. You need to understand that the problem people have is not lacking in education. It is you taking a word and immediately segueing it to a specific group of people. You can pull up your crime statistics and people will agree with you about the phrase stop and frisk. But I'm going to sit here and say, rewatch that first guy's video and tell me where he implies anything about black people. Oh, he was implying it with stop and frisk. So you're taking your biases of history, and when anyone says specific buzzwords in your mind, it lets you activate that core part of your brain that makes you think, oh my God, you're so racist for saying this. You're coding this so secretly that no one can see it, but I can see it because my brain works in this direction instead of a full direction straight, so that you could understand that doing that makes you look dumb as all fuck.
I'm at the airport right now, which is the same place that Date Right was when he made a video about stop and frisk. Now, when you say stop and frisk, when you mention that, you are talking about black people.
No, you're definitely not, but let's see you try to make this point.
Stop and frisk disproportionately affects black people.
Literally in the source he uses, if you look, you can see that it says black and Latino people, not just black people. So he ignored his own source and just said black people. It also disproportionately affected Hispanic people. So if we want to get more specific, you can see 50 to 55% of people that were stopped and frisked were black. What this means is around almost half the people that were stopped and frisked were not black. So when you talk about stop and frisk, no, you are not talking about black people. Let me use an example so you better understand what I mean. Let me give you an example so you better understand what I mean. Let's say in New York, there was a politician and he was like, hey, we should put murderers in jail. And people were like, yes, absolutely, great. And this guy on the far right was like, yes, let's put black people in the jail. You guys would call this guy racist. You would be freaking out. And you say, why would you say something that's so horrible? And he comes back to you and he says, well, 63% of people who are arrested for murder are black. So when you're talking about murderers, you're talking about black people. You guys would have a conniption. You would be offended. That is the broken logic that this creator just tried to use. It's called the fallacy of division. So yes, it's idiotic when you say
stop and frisk, when you mention that, you are talking about black people.
Yeah, that's pretty dumb. When you talk about stop and frisk, you're talking about stop and frisk. You're not talking about the race that's most affected by stop and frisk. I really feel like I shouldn't have to say that. But he wasn't done. He also was saying this.
When Date Right comes on and says, they used to stop and frisk criminals, so everyone that was stopped and frisked, just walking down the street, walking to work, enjoying their life, is a criminal, and it's disproportionately affecting people that aren't white. Yeah, I got a little offended.
The problem with this is that's not what Date Right said. He dropped out a very specific word, and once he dropped out that word, it allowed him to try to make the point he just tried to make. But here's actually what Date Right said.
We used to have stop and frisk for criminals in this country.
He specifically said for criminals in this country. And that's a very large difference. This is what this guy said he said.
When Date Right comes on and says, they used to stop and frisk criminals.
See the difference? He said stop and frisk was for criminals. If they were stopping and frisking criminals, how would they know they were criminals? This video was riddled with logical fallacies and verbal misrepresentations. And if you think about it, this might be an insight into the liberal mind. Everything is seen through a racial lens. In addition to that, he had to try to drop words that were actually said in order to try to make his point. Not a good look.
White savior, I understand. You have been viewed as an outcast. You have been looked down upon. You have been viewed as nothing more than a problem. And after spending all that time getting bitched at by a bunch of people who call you racist just for breathing, you now decide that you want to stand up and fight for your non-existent brothers and sisters. But let the poor, disenfranchised, indigenous nigga tell you straight up, I don't need you to be speaking for me or to help me, because it's clear as fucking day you barely care and you're only interested in looking good for the sake of the dumbass fan base you have that just sit there and clap like seals when you get your gotchas against people on social media. So I will say this very slowly for everybody in the back. Just because somebody says criminal doesn't mean they mean black people. Because in case you forgot, a criminal could be anybody you see out in public. I know, such a struggling lesson for a lot of you to learn, but I'm glad I'm always here to teach you. Subscribe to the channel. I will see you all in the next one. Mwah. Goodbye.